"Come early, Mom," my children told me. "We're going to celebrate with you." But when I arrived at that fancy restaurant, the waiter handed me a laminated card that read, "Limited guest." "That means no dinner, mother-in-law," my daughter-in-law, Brittany, whispered with a cruel smile. My daughter, Taylor, just burst out laughing like it was the funniest joke in the world. If you're reading this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because what happened next changed my life forever. My name is Patricia, and I'm 65 years old. All my life, I was the perfect mother, the one who always said yes, always forgave, and always sacrificed. I raised my children alone after their father passed away when they were teenagers. I worked double shifts at the textile mill. I sold homemade food on weekends. I cleaned houses at night. All of it so that Taylor and her brother, Michael, could get a proper education, so they could have what I never had. Taylor was always special, smart, and ambitious, but also cold. From a young age, she had this way of looking at me as if I were an obstacle on her path to something better. When she married Michael, I thought perhaps motherhood would soften her, but Michael was even worse than she was. An arrogant man who worked in finance and always spoke to me like I was some ignorant countrywoman. "Mom," Taylor would say every time she visited, "you don't understand how the modern world works. Just let Michael handle your paperwork. He knows about these things." Michael would nod with that condescending smirk I hated so much. "Mrs. Collins, you've done enough. Now rest and let us take care of everything." But I wasn't the helpless old lady they thought I was. Through all those years of sacrifice, I learned something my children never knew: the value of silence and patience. While they thought all I knew how to do was sew and cook, I invested every extra dollar I made. I bought small properties in neighborhoods I knew would grow. I saved money in accounts they didn't know about. I built a nest egg in secret because there was something in the way they looked at me that told me I would need it one day. Taylor had a daughter, Sarah, my 8-year-old granddaughter, who was the only one who treated me with true love. When I visited, Sarah would run to hug me and whisper, "Grandma, Mommy says mean things about you when you're not here." Those words broke my heart, but they also prepared me for what was to come. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Taylor called me with a voice that was strangely sweet. "Mom, we want to invite you to dinner tomorrow. Something special. Come early. We're going to celebrate with you." Michael yelled from the background, "Yeah, Mrs. Collins, we're finally going to celebrate the right way." It gave me hope to think that, maybe, after all these years, my children finally appreciated me. I put on my prettiest green dress, the one I had saved for special occasions. I did my hair and put on a little perfume. I walked to that restaurant with a heart full of hope, thinking maybe they were planning something beautiful for my upcoming birthday, or perhaps they wanted to apologize for all those years of indifference. When I arrived, the restaurant was one of those elegant places I had never been to before. Sparkling chandeliers, white tablecloths, soft music. I felt proud that my children had chosen such a nice place to celebrate with me. I looked around and saw them at a large table, laughing and chatting animatedly. I approached with a smile, but something was off. The waiter intercepted me before I reached the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said with an awkward smile. "You are the special guest?" I said yes, that I was Taylor's mother. Then he handed me that laminated card that said, "Limited guest." "What does this mean?" I asked, confused. The waiter glanced at my children's table and then whispered, "It means you can sit down, but you can't order food. Just water, ma'am." I felt like I had been slapped. I looked at the table and saw Taylor laughing, covering her mouth with her hand, while Michael recorded everything with his phone. I walked to the table with that humiliating card hanging from my neck. Brittany looked at me with eyes sparkling with malice and whispered loudly enough for Michael to hear, "That means no food, mother-in-law. I hope you ate before you came." Michael let out a huge laugh and said, "Oh, Mrs. Collins, it's just a joke. You're always so dramatic." But it wasn't a joke. I saw in their eyes that they were enjoying every second of my humiliation. I sat down in that chair, feeling like a beggar in the middle of royalty. Brittany and Michael continued their dinner as if nothing had happened, cutting into their steaks while I had only a glass of water in front of me. The aroma of the food tortured me, but what hurt the most was seeing how much they enjoyed my suffering. "Mom," Brittany said, delicately wiping her mouth with a napkin, "you're probably wondering why we brought you here." Her voice had that coldness I knew so well, that way of talking she used when she wanted to hurt me. Michael nodded while chewing, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "You see," Brittany continued, "Michael and I have been talking about your future. You're 65 years old now. You're all alone in that old house, and frankly, we're worried you can't take care of yourself." She leaned forward, feigning concern. "We found a very nice nursing home, small and affordable, perfect for someone at your level." The world swayed around me. Michael put down his fork and looked at me with that smile I had learned to hate. "Mrs. Collins, you've served your purpose in life. You raised your children. Now it's time for you to rest. We'll take care of everything." He pulled some documents from his briefcase and put them in front of me. "We just need you to sign these papers, nothing complicated." I looked at the documents in horror. They were property transfer deeds, powers of attorney, documents that would essentially turn me into a legal pauper. My house, my savings, everything would go into Brittany's hands. "It's for your own good, Mom," my daughter insisted. "You don't understand investments or taxes. Michael is a finance expert. He'll know what to do with everything." "And don't worry," Michael added with false kindness. "We'll give you a monthly allowance. $50 is fine for your personal expenses. You know, soap, toothpaste, that kind of stuff." Brittany let out a little giggle. "Mom, you won't need more than that. The home will give you food and a roof over your head." I felt the anger rising in my chest like boiling lava. These two monsters, whom I had raised and loved, were planning to steal everything I had built over decades of sacrifice. And worst of all, they were doing it with such calculated cruelty that it made me sick. "And what if I don't want to sign?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael and Brittany exchanged a knowing look. "Mom," Taylor said in a soft but threatening voice, "do you really want to do this the hard way? We can have you declared mentally incompetent. Michael has contacts at the hospital, doctors who can certify that you're not of sound mind." "Think about it, Mrs. Collins," Michael added. "A woman your age living alone, with no family visiting, it would be very easy to convince a judge you need medical supervision." He leaned back in his chair, savoring every word. "Or you can sign now, voluntarily, and we'll make sure you have a peaceful old age." The waiter discreetly approached and placed the bill on the table. Michael looked at it and smiled maliciously. "Oh, what a shame, Mrs. Collins. It seems we brought just enough money for our meal. You can pay for your water." He pointed mockingly at my empty glass. "That's $5.50. Brittany pretended to look for her wallet. "Oh, Mom, I don't have any change either. What are we going to do?" They both looked at me, waiting for my complete humiliation. They wanted to see me beg, pleading for them to help me with that measly $5.50. But something changed in that moment. Maybe it was the way Michael savored every word of his threat, or the way Brittany smiled when she mentioned the nursing home. Maybe it was the memory of all the nights I stayed up sewing to pay for their college, or all the times I ate beans so they could eat meat. I took out my phone, a simple model they always criticized. "What are you doing, Mom?" Brittany asked, curious. "Are you going to call someone to loan you $5? Michael let out a huge laugh. "Who is she going to call? She has no friends, she has no family, she only has us." I typed a text message, my fingers trembling, not with fear, but with a cold fury I had never felt before. "Cancel everything immediately." I sent the message and put my phone away. Brittany and Michael looked at me strangely, but continued laughing with each other, planning how they would spend my money. "You know what, Mom?" Brittany said, leaning dangerously close to my face. "Maybe it's better you know the whole truth. Michael and I have already been spending part of your inheritance. We bought a new car, we renovated the house, we went on a European vacation. We figured since you're going to die soon anyway. She shrugged as if she were talking about the weather. Michael nodded proudly. We have the accounts calculated, Mrs. Collins. Your little old house is worth about $200,000. You have about $50,000 in the bank. We can pay our debts with that and have a little extra to invest. He leaned forward. You've been very useful without knowing it. And Sarah, Brittany added cruelly. We've told her that Grandma is sick in the head, that she says crazy things, and that it's better she doesn't visit you anymore. The poor girl doesn't even ask about you now. Those words were like daggers straight to my heart. I looked at my watch. 40 minutes had passed since I sent that text message. Michael was still talking about his plans for my money when his phone started ringing. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's the bank, he murmured. Why would the bank call me on a Wednesday night? He answered the call with confidence. Yes, this is Michael. His expression gradually changed from confidence to confusion, then to horror. What do you mean it's frozen? What does that mean? His voice got louder. That's impossible. I have authorization to use that account. Brittany looked at him with growing panic. Michael hung up and immediately dialed another number. It's the mortgage bank, he explained nervously. His second call was even worse. Canceled, but we just refinanced. Who has the authority to... His voice cracked. Michael's phone kept ringing. Every call brought worse news. His credit card had been canceled, his checking account was frozen, and the loan they had used to buy the new car had been immediately revoked. Brittany looked at him with panicked eyes as he desperately tried to understand what was happening. This has to be a system error, Michael yelled, attracting the stares of the other diners. I'm going to sue the bank. But even as he spoke, his voice sounded less convincing. The arrogant man who had threatened me minutes before was now sweating and trembling like a scared child. Brittany grabbed her purse and pulled out her credit card. I'll pay for dinner, she said, trying to sound calm. But when the waiter swiped the card, the machine made that terrible sound we all know. Transaction denied. Brittany went pale. It must be a technical issue. Try again. The waiter, visibly uncomfortable, tried 3 more times. Nothing. Brittany pulled out another card, then another. All of them were denied. Michael tried with his, but the result was the same. They were standing there in that elegant restaurant, unable to pay a $200 bill. Mom, Brittany said, her voice broken. You know something about this. For the first time in years, she was talking to me with respect, with fear. I looked her directly in the eyes and smiled. It was a small smile, but enough for her to understand that this was no coincidence. Me? I asked with feigned innocence. I'm just an ignorant old lady who doesn't understand modern finance. Remember? Michael looked at me with a mix of fury and terror. What did you do, you witch? He yelled at me. What did you do? The waiter nervously approached. Excuse me, but I need you to settle the bill. Brittany and Michael looked at each other, desperate. They had no cash. All their cards were canceled, and I was still sitting there calmly with my limited guest card. I took out my old worn wallet, the same one they had always looked at with pity. I put exactly $5.50 on the table. Here is the payment for my water, I said serenely. As for your bill, well, as you said, you're finance experts. I'm sure you'll find a solution. I got up to leave, but Brittany grabbed my arm. You can't just leave us here. Her eyes were full of panicked tears. We're your family, Michael nodded desperately. Mrs. Collins, please, we can talk. We can fix this. I looked at both of them, these 2 people who had planned to steal everything from me and lock me away in a nursing home. Family? I asked softly. The family that was going to give me $50 a month for toothpaste? I slipped my hand out of Brittany's grasp and walked toward the exit. Mom, wait! Brittany yelled, running after me. We can explain everything. It was just a joke. But I was already out of the restaurant. The last image I had was of the waiter talking on the phone, probably calling the manager to deal with an unpaid $200 bill. I walked 3 blocks until I reached a small, family-owned coffee shop. I sat at a corner table and ordered a hot chocolate. While I waited, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized. My lawyer, William. Yes, I had a lawyer, something my dear children never knew. "Mrs. Collins," William's familiar voice said. "It's all done. The joint accounts have been closed, the cards canceled, and the loans guaranteed by your properties have been immediately revoked. Since you were the principal guarantor, you had the legal right to withdraw your backing at any time." I smiled as I took a sip of my chocolate. "And what about Brittany and Michael's house?" I asked. "Technically, it was yours, Mrs. Collins. You put down the down payment and signed as a co-owner. By withdrawing your share, they lost the ability to maintain the mortgage. The bank has already initiated foreclosure proceedings." William had been my lawyer for 15 years. I hired him when I started investing my first savings. He was a discreet, intelligent man who understood that a woman like me needed legal protection without drawing attention. All these years, he had managed my investments, my properties, my secret bank accounts. "Do you want to proceed with the next step?" William asked. There was a plan, one we had designed years ago, just in case my family ever tried to take advantage of me. I never thought I would have to use it, but that night at the restaurant showed me I had been preparing for the right thing. "Not yet," I told him. "First, I want them to suffer a little. I want them to feel what it's like to be helpless." William laughed softly. "You're more intelligent than they ever imagined, Mrs. Collins." When I hung up, I thought about all those years of pretending to be the submissive, ignorant mother. While they thought all I knew was how to sew and cook, I had built a small but solid empire. 3 rental properties in downtown Charlotte, an investment account that had grown steadily for 2 decades, and legal connections that protected me from exactly what had just happened. My phone rang again. It was Brittany calling from the restaurant's phone. "Mom," her voice sounded broken. "Please help us. We can't pay the bill. They're going to call the police." In the background, I could hear Michael arguing with someone, his voice hysterical and desperate. "Brittany," I said calmly, "do you remember what you told me an hour ago? That I had already served my purpose in life and that it was time for me to rest?" There was silence on the other end. "Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Rest." "But we're your family," she yelled. "You can't just abandon us like this." Her hypocrisy was almost comical. "Abandon you?" I asked. "Just like you were going to abandon me in that nursing home with $50 a month?" I hung up and turned off my phone. That night, I slept better than I had in years. For the first time in decades, I didn't worry about what my children thought of me. I didn't try to please them. I didn't pretend to be less intelligent than I was. I had taken off a mask I had worn for so long that I had almost forgotten who I really was. The next morning, William called me early. "Mrs. Collins, I have some interesting news." His voice had that contained excitement he used when he had discovered something important. "Last night, after what happened at the restaurant, I decided to look a little deeper into your son-in-law Michael's finances." "What did you find?" I asked, though something told me I wasn't going to like the answer. "Mrs. Collins," William continued, his voice low, "Michael isn't the finance expert he pretends to be. In fact, he's involved in something much more serious." My heart started beating faster. I found some very suspicious bank transfers, money going in and out of accounts in offshore tax havens, transactions that don't match his declared income. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process the information. "What kind of transactions?" I asked. William sighed. "Money laundering, Mrs. Collins. Michael has been using his job at the bank to launder money for criminal organizations, and worst of all, Brittany knows about it." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My own daughter, the child I had raised with so much love, was involved in criminal activities. "How do you know?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "Brittany is listed as a beneficiary on several of the Shell accounts. She receives regular payments for consulting, but there are no records of any actual work. She's receiving dirty money, Mrs. Collins. That's why they needed your inheritance so desperately." It wasn't just greed, it was survival. The pieces began to fit together in my mind like a macabre puzzle. The new house, the luxury car, the European vacation Brittany had mentioned so casually. Everything had been bought with laundered money, and now they had debts with dangerous people who didn't accept excuses. "There's more," William continued. "Michael owes about $200,000 to an organization that doesn't forgive. He was planning to use your inheritance to pay off that debt and disappear from the country. Brittany and he already had plane tickets for tomorrow night to the Cayman Islands." "They were going to run?" I asked, incredulous. "And what was going to happen to me?" William paused, a long and painful silence. "Mrs. Collins, according to the documents I found, you were going to have an accident after you signed the papers. A slip in the bathroom, a fall down the stairs, something that would seem natural for a woman your age." The room started spinning. My own children had planned not only to rob me, but to murder me. The nursing home had been a cruel lie. They never had any intention of keeping me alive once they got my money. "Do you have proof of all this?" I asked, surprised by how firm my voice sounded, despite the emotional storm I felt inside. "I have everything, Mrs. Collins. Bank records, emails between Michael and his criminal contacts, text messages between him and Brittany, planning how to handle your situation. I even have recordings." "Recordings?" My heart stopped. Michael is careless with his phone. He leaves voice recordings on without realizing it. I have a full conversation between him and Brittany from 3 days ago, planning exactly how they were going to trick you tonight and what to do afterward. William sent the files to my phone. With trembling hands, I listened to the recordings. Michael's voice was clear and cold. "Once the old woman signs the papers, we have to act fast. A domestic accident, something simple. Brittany, you can't be at the house when it happens. You need a solid alibi." My daughter's voice responded with a coldness that chilled my blood. "And Sarah? My daughter will ask about her grandma." Michael laughed. "We'll tell her grandma went on a long trip. Kids forget quickly. In a year, Sarah won't even remember she had a grandma." I had to pause the recording because I was shaking so much I couldn't hold the phone. These monsters had planned to completely erase me from existence, not just kill me, but make my own granddaughter forget I had ever existed. "Mrs. Collins," William said softly when I had recovered enough to answer his call. "Is there anything else you need to know? The men Michael owes money to won't wait long. According to my sources, they're already looking for him. Last night, when his accounts were frozen, Michael lost his only chance to pay." "What does that mean?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "It means they are in mortal danger, Mrs. Collins. Those people don't forgive $200,000 debts if they can't pay within the next 48 hours. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Michael and Brittany were trapped between their own greed and the consequences of their crimes. They had dug their own grave while trying to dig mine. "What do you recommend we do?" I asked. William reflected for a moment. "We have 2 options. We can turn all the evidence over to the authorities right now, the FBI, the local police, the IRS. With what we have, Michael and Brittany would go to prison for decades. And the second option? We wait. We let the situation play out naturally. Michael must be desperate by now. He's probably trying to get money any way he can, and when desperate people do desperate things..." He left the phrase hanging. I thought about everything I had heard. My children had not only planned to rob and kill me, but they had lived for years on blood money. They had corrupted everything I had built with honest work. "William," I said finally, "I want you to do something for me." "Anything you need, Mrs. Collins. I want you to contact that criminal organization." There was silence on the other end. "Pardon? Did I hear you correctly?" "I want you to let them know exactly where they can find Michael and Brittany." "Mrs. Collins," William said, his voice concerned. That could result in..." "Exactly what they planned for me," I interrupted him. "The difference is that they brought it on themselves. I was innocent." William sighed deeply. "I understand your anger, Mrs. Collins, but are you sure you want to get your hands dirty like that?" His question made me pause. Did I really want to become the same kind of monster they were? "No," I said after a moment. "You're right, but there's something else we can do." What do you have in mind? We're going to mess with them a little first. We're going to make them feel exactly what it's like to be completely helpless. And then, when they've suffered enough, we'll turn the evidence over to the authorities. What do you propose specifically? William asked, and I could hear in his voice that he was intrigued by my plan. First, I want Sarah to be completely protected. She's innocent in all this, and she doesn't deserve to suffer for her parents' crimes. I've already taken care of that, William said. I have my best private investigators watching the little girl 24 hours a day. If anything happens to her, we'll know immediately. I felt relieved. Second, I want you to freeze their remaining personal accounts too. Everything. So they can't even buy a stick of gum. Done. And third, I want the criminals Michael owes money to know that he's betraying them, that he's planning to flee the country without paying. William laughed softly. That's brilliant, Mrs. Collins. You'll put them in an impossible situation. Exactly. Now they can't run because the criminals will be watching them, but they also can't stay because they have no money to pay. I felt a cold, calculated satisfaction. They're going to feel exactly what I felt last night at that restaurant. Completely trapped, completely humiliated, completely helpless. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Visit my granddaughter, Sarah, at her school. William had assured me the girl was being discreetly watched, but I needed to see her with my own eyes. I needed to remember why all of this was worth it. I waited outside the elementary school until the bell rang. The children came running out as always, and there she was, my little 8-year-old Sarah, with her pink backpack and messy pigtails. When she saw me, her face lit up in a way that broke my heart. "Grandma Patricia!" she yelled, running toward me. "Mommy said you were sick and couldn't visit me." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair that always smelled like strawberry shampoo. "I'm fine, my love. How's my princess?" Sarah looked at me with those big, innocent eyes that reminded me of Brittany when she was little, before greed and wickedness corrupted her heart. "Grandma, Mommy and Daddy have been really weird. Last night they came home really late and were yelling a lot. Mommy was crying." My heart sped up. "What were they saying, my love?" Sarah shrugged. "Something about money and about you. Daddy said bad words I can't repeat, and Mommy kept saying it was all your fault." Of course it was my fault. It was my fault for being blind for so long, for allowing these parasites to feed on my kindness. It was my fault for raising a daughter who could so coldly plan my death. "Sarah," I said, kneeling to be at her height, "would you like to stay with Grandma for a few days? We could bake cookies, watch movies, play at the park." Her eyes filled with excitement. "Yes, but I have to ask Mommy." "Don't you worry about that, my love. Grandma already spoke to Mommy." It was a lie, but a necessary one. I wasn't going to let this innocent child be hurt by the consequences of her parents' actions. I took Sarah to my house, the real house where I had lived my whole life, not the small cottage Brittany and Michael thought was all I had. My real house was a 2-story property in a quiet neighborhood, completely paid for, with a backyard where Sarah could play safely. While Sarah played in the yard, I called William. "The girl is with me," I informed him. "Perfect," he replied. "And I have news about our friends. Michael didn't go to work today. According to my contacts at the bank, he called in sick, but the truth is, he's afraid to leave his house." "Why?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Because the men he owes money to have been asking for him at his office, asking very aggressively. His boss is considering suspending him for bringing personal problems to work." I smiled as I watched Sarah swinging happily. Everything was going exactly as we had planned. And Brittany? Brittany is completely hysterical. She tried to go to several banks today to apply for emergency loans, but her credit report is ruined. She also tried to pawn her jewelry, but it turned out to be cheap fakes. That didn't surprise me. Michael had always been a man of appearances. He had probably bought fake jewelry to impress Brittany, and she had been too naive or greedy to notice. "There's more," William continued. Brittany went to your old house today, the house where you used to live. She was looking for something. What was she looking for? Hidden money, documents, anything of value that might have been left behind. But of course, she didn't find anything useful because there was nothing to find. I had been very careful all these years to keep my true assets completely separate from the life my children knew. They thought I was a poor widow living on a small pension. "William, have you contacted our friends from the underworld yet?" I asked carefully, knowing there could be people listening. "Yes, Mrs. Collins. I let them know that Michael is planning to disappear without fulfilling his obligations. I also gave them his current address and his daily routine." "How did they react?" "As expected. They weren't happy. They said Michael has until tomorrow at noon to produce the full amount of money or face the consequences. They also said that any attempt to flee would be considered a declaration of war." Perfect. Michael and Brittany were now trapped in a cage of their own making. They couldn't flee because they were being watched. They couldn't pay because they didn't have access to funds. And they couldn't seek help because no one else knew about their criminal activities. My phone rang. It was Brittany. I decided to answer this time, curious to hear her level of desperation. "Mom?" Her voice sounded hoarse, as if she had been crying for hours. "Do you have Sarah? Please, tell me you have Sarah." "Sarah is perfectly safe," I answered coldly. "She's where she should have been all along, with someone who truly loves her." "Mom, please, we need to talk. This has gotten out of control." Her voice cracked. "Michael says dangerous people are looking for us." "Dangerous people?" I asked, feigning surprise. "What are you talking about, Brittany?" "You know what I'm talking about. Somehow you found out about Michael's business." Her mask of innocence had finally fallen. "Ah," I said softly. "You mean the money laundering business? The $200,000 Michael owes to criminals, the plans you had to steal my inheritance and then kill me?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "How? How do you know that?" Brittany whispered. "I'm an ignorant old lady who doesn't understand modern finance, remember?" I answered sarcastically. "But it turns out I do understand a few things, like the recordings where you planned my death." Brittany started sobbing. "Mom, please, it was just Michael. He forced me. I never wanted to hurt you." Lies. I had the recordings where she actively participated in the planning, where she laughed at the idea that Sarah would forget me after my death. "Brittany," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "you and Michael had your chance last night at the restaurant. You had the chance to treat me with dignity, with respect, with love. Instead, you chose to humiliate and threaten me." "Can we fix this?" she cried desperately. "Can we go to the police? We can confess everything. Michael can give the money back." "With what money, Brittany? My money that you were planning to steal?" "Mom, those people are going to kill us. If we don't have the money by noon tomorrow, Michael says they're going to—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "They're going to do exactly what you planned to do to me," I finished for her. "Please," she begged. "I know you have money hidden. We always knew you had more than you said. Just lend us $200,000. We promise we'll pay you back." Her desperation was music to my ears. "You promise?" I laughed. "Just like you promised a family dinner and instead gave me a limited guest card?" "That was different." "Different how? Because this time, you're the ones who need help." I heard Michael yelling something in the background. His voice sounded hysterical, terrified. "Brittany," I continued, "let me ask you something. If our positions were reversed, if I were begging you for help, what would you do?" There was a long pause. We both knew the answer. "Exactly," I said. "You would do exactly what you did last night. You would laugh at my suffering and tell me I had already served my purpose in life." "Mom, please, at least think about Sarah. She's going to be an orphan." That was the last straw. Sarah is already being cared for by someone who truly loves her, someone who doesn't plan to use her innocence as a shield for criminal activities. I hung up and turned off the phone. Outside, Sarah was still playing happily, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding. That child deserved better than criminal parents who used her as a tool for manipulation. William called me an hour later. "Mrs. Collins, there's movement. Michael just left his house with a suitcase. My men are following him." "Do you think he's trying to run?" "It's possible. Or maybe he's desperately trying to find money. Either way, our other friends are also following him. Michael has no idea he's being tracked by multiple groups." "Perfect. Let him make a mistake. Let him do something desperate that will completely seal his fate. And if he tries to hurt someone innocent in his desperation, that's why Sarah is with me and why you have people watching him. Michael is a coward. When cowards get desperate, they usually only hurt themselves." That night, as Sarah slept peacefully in the guest room, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from unknown numbers, desperate text messages, even an attempted video call, all from Brittany and Michael, each one more hysterical, each one more terrified. I decided to answer one of the calls to hear how far their desperation had gone. It was Michael, and his voice sounded completely broken. "Mrs. Collins, please listen to me. I know we did terrible things, but you don't understand the situation we're in." "I'm listening, Michael," I said coldly. "But make it quick. I have more important things to do." Those people I owe money to, they're not normal people. They're part of an organization that controls the entire drug trade in the region. If I don't pay them by tomorrow— "Yes, I know," I interrupted him. "They're going to kill you, just like you and Brittany planned to kill me." "That was different," he yelled. "You're old. You've lived your life. We're young. We have a future." His audacity left me speechless. Even in his desperation, even begging for his life, Michael still believed my life was worth less than his. "Michael," I said with an icy calm, "you just confirmed exactly why you deserve everything that's happening to you." "You can't just let us die," he begged. "Think about Sarah. She needs her parents." "Sarah needs parents who aren't criminals," I replied. "Parents who don't plan murders for money." "I'll give you everything," Michael yelled. "The house, the car, everything we have. Just help us escape the country." I laughed. "Everything you have? Michael, you have nothing. The house is mortgaged with my money. The car was bought with laundered money, and Brittany's jewels are fake. You literally have nothing of value." The silence on the other end told me he was finally understanding the magnitude of his situation. "Besides," I continued, "do you really think I'm going to help two people who recorded conversations planning my death, who described exactly how they were going to make it look like an accident? You listened to those recordings?" His voice completely broke. "Every word, Michael. Every detail of how you were going to kill me and make Sarah forget about me. Every plan about how you would spend my money after my funeral." Michael started crying, an adult man sobbing like a child. "Please," he whimpered, "tell us what we have to do. Anything. We'll get on our knees. We'll kiss your feet. We'll be your slaves." "Michael," I said softly, "there's something you and Brittany never understood. Respect can't be bought with desperate pleas. Love can't be regained with empty promises. And trust, once broken the way you broke it, can't be repaired." "Then what do you want from us?" he yelled. "Do you want to see us die? Do you want Sarah to be an orphan?" "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to feel exactly what I felt last night in that restaurant. Helpless, humiliated, betrayed by the people you trusted the most." I hung up and turned off the phone, but my peace didn't last long. 20 minutes later, I heard noises outside my house. I looked out the window and saw Brittany's car parked on the street. She and Michael were standing in front of my door, arguing in low voices. I immediately called William. "They're here," I whispered to him, "at my house." "My men are 2 minutes away," he assured me. "Are they armed?" "I don't know, but Michael is acting very erratically." The doorbell rang, then again. Then they started pounding on the door. "Mom," Brittany yelled, "we know you're in there. We saw the lights. We need to talk to you." Her voice had a hysterical edge that made me nervous. Michael joined in the yelling. "Mrs. Collins, we just want to get Sarah back. Give us back our daughter." It was a lie. If they really cared about Sarah, they wouldn't have exposed her to their criminal world in the first place. The pounding got louder. "Open the door," Michael yelled. "We know you have money. We know you've been lying to us for years." His voice was getting more aggressive, more desperate. I silently went upstairs to check that Sarah was still asleep. Thank goodness the girl was a heavy sleeper, and the yelling hadn't woken her. I went back downstairs and cautiously approached the window to see what they were doing. Michael was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, talking on the phone with someone. His body language was that of a man on the verge of a mental breakdown. Brittany was sitting on the steps, crying and pulling at her hair. My phone vibrated with a text message from William. "My men are in position, but there's a problem. The others have also arrived. There are 3 cars with armed men parked on the surrounding streets. They're waiting." My blood ran cold. The criminals Michael owed money to had found my address. They probably followed Michael and Brittany here. My house, the safe haven I had built for Sarah and me, was now surrounded by dangerous people. Another message from William. "Don't go outside. Don't turn on any more lights. I'm going to call the police." But I knew the police might take too long, and in his desperation, Michael could do something stupid that would put Sarah in danger. Outside, Michael had finished his phone call and was now yelling louder. "Patricia, I know you're listening to me. Those people are here. They're waiting. If you don't give me the money now, they're going to come in and they're going to hurt Sarah." It was an empty threat. Michael had no control over those criminals, but I also knew that desperate men are unpredictable, and the presence of armed criminals near my house where my granddaughter was sleeping was unacceptable. I made a decision. I dialed the direct emergency number William had given me for extreme situations. "Code red," I said simply. "Understood," William replied. "In 3 minutes." Code red was our plan for extreme emergencies. William had contacts in federal law enforcement, people who could respond faster and with more force than the local police. It also meant we were going to show all our cards at once. Brittany was now pounding on the door with both fists. "Mom, please, just give us the money and we'll leave. I promise we'll never bother you again." Her promises were worthless. I had listened to the recordings where she planned my death. Michael approached the living room window and tried to look inside. When he saw me watching him, his eyes filled with a desperate madness. "There she is," he yelled to Brittany. "The crazy old woman is in there. She's laughing at us." I wasn't laughing. I was calculating. I was planning. I was protecting my granddaughter from the monsters her parents had turned out to be. Michael started searching the yard for something. He found a large stone and went to the window. "If you don't come out, I'm going to break this window," he yelled. "I'm going to go in and get that money myself." That was too far. I took out my phone and yelled loud enough for him to hear me. "Michael, if you break that window, I'm calling the police right now." "Call whoever you want," he responded, his voice broken. "Those people are going to kill me anyway. At least I'll get the money first." He raised the stone, and in that moment, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, multiple sirens, approaching quickly. Michael froze with the stone in the air. Brittany lifted her head, her eyes full of terror. But the sirens weren't just from the police. I also heard the distinctive sound of federal vehicles, the same ones I had heard in movies. William had kept his promise. The cavalry was coming. The criminals who had been waiting in the streets apparently heard the sirens too, because I saw car lights speeding away in all directions. Michael and Brittany were now completely alone, surrounded, with no possible escape. Michael dropped the stone and started running toward his car. But before he could get there, 3 police cars and 2 federal cars surrounded my property. Armed men got out quickly, with vests that read FBI and DEA. Brittany collapsed on the steps, sobbing. Michael raised his hands, finally understanding that his nightmare had ended, not the way he expected, but it had definitely ended. The federal agents moved with military precision. Michael was immediately handcuffed while yelling about his rights and how it was all a misunderstanding. Brittany tried to run toward the house, probably to get to Sarah, but she was stopped before she could go up the first step. "Mom!" Brittany yelled as they cuffed her. "Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we're your family." But I remained silent behind my window, watching as justice finally caught up with these two people who had planned my death. An FBI agent approached my door. He was a serious-looking older man who identified himself as Agent Williams. "Mrs. Collins, I'm with the FBI. Your lawyer contacted us with evidence of criminal activities. Are you all right?" I opened the door slowly. "I'm fine, Agent Williams. My granddaughter is sleeping upstairs. Could we speak in a lower voice?" He nodded respectfully. "Of course, ma'am. We understand there's a minor in the house. Is she the suspect's daughter?" "Yes," I replied. "Sarah is 8 years old. She's completely innocent in all this." Agent Williams took notes. "Don't worry, ma'am. We have special protocols for minors. The girl will be completely protected throughout the process." Outside, Michael was still yelling, "This is harassment! That crazy old woman is setting us up!" His words only confirmed what the agents already knew about his character. Brittany, on the other hand, had gone into complete shock. She was sitting in the back seat of the police car, staring blankly ahead. "Mrs. Collins," Agent Williams continued, "your lawyer gave us substantial evidence of money laundering, murder planning, and conspiracy. Can you confirm that this evidence is authentic?" "Every word," I answered firmly. "I have the original recordings, the bank documents, everything." The agent nodded. "We're going to need your full testimony, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, we want to secure the scene and protect the minor." He looked up to where Sarah was still sleeping. "Does the girl know anything about her parents' activities?" "Nothing," I assured him. "Sarah is a normal child who only knows her parents have been acting weird lately. She has no idea about the money, the crimes, or the plans they had. Perfect. That will make things easier for her." William arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by a social worker specializing in minors. The woman was kind and professional, exactly the type of person Sarah would need when she woke up and discovered her parents had been arrested. "Mrs. Collins," William told me privately, "this is going to be big, very big. Michael wasn't just a small-time money launderer. He was part of an international network. The FBI has been investigating this organization for 3 years." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Michael and Brittany are going to face very serious federal charges. Money laundering, conspiracy, murder planning. We're talking about 20 to 30 years in prison, minimum." I looked outside, where Michael was still being interrogated next to the police car. His arrogance had completely vanished. He was now just a scared man who finally understood the consequences of his actions. "And Brittany?" I asked. "Brittany is in a particularly bad situation," William replied, "because in addition to being an accomplice in the money laundering, we have clear evidence that she actively participated in planning your murder. That's first-degree attempted murder." The social worker approached us. "Mrs. Collins, we need to talk about Sarah's temporary care. Would you be willing to be her temporary guardian while we resolve her parents' legal situation?" "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "Sarah is my granddaughter. This is where she should be." "Excellent. We'll do the paperwork tomorrow. But for tonight, Sarah can stay with you." Around 2 in the morning, they finally took Michael and Brittany away. Before they left, Brittany managed to yell one last thing. "Mom, please take care of Sarah. Tell her we love her." It was too little, too late. Michael, on the other hand, yelled something completely different at me. "This isn't over, old woman. When I get out of prison, I'm going to—" But he didn't finish the sentence because one of the agents pushed him into the car. After everyone was gone, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea trying to process everything that had happened. In less than 48 hours, I had gone from being a humiliated mother in a restaurant to being responsible for sending my own children to prison. Did I feel a little guilty? No. Did I regret it? Not at all. They had made their own decisions. They had chosen greed over love, crime over honesty, betrayal over loyalty, and they had planned to kill me for money. William called me early in the morning. Mrs. Collins, there are important developments. Michael is trying to make a deal with the FBI. He's offering information on the entire criminal network in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Brittany? Brittany is asking for a lawyer, but she's also... He paused. She's also trying to blame you. Blame me for what? She says you forced them to commit crimes by denying them access to your money, that it was all desperation caused by your cruelty. I laughed bitterly. Even arrested, handcuffed, facing decades in prison, Brittany was still trying to manipulate the situation and blame others for her own decisions. William, I said to him, I want you to do one more thing for me. Whatever you need, Mrs. Collins. I want to set up a trust fund for Sarah. All my money, all my properties, everything goes to her. But she can't access any of it until she's 25 years old, and only if she proves she's a responsible and ethical person. And if Michael and Brittany get out of prison? When they get out of prison, I corrected him, they're going to find they have nothing. No house, no money, no access to Sarah. They're going to have to start their lives from scratch, exactly like they wanted me to. It's poetic justice, William admitted. But are you sure you want to completely disinherit Brittany? She's your daughter, after all. Brittany stopped being my daughter when she planned my murder, I replied firmly. Sarah is my family now. She is my future. When Sarah finally woke up, around 9 in the morning, she came downstairs in her pajamas, yawning and rubbing her eyes. Good morning, Grandma, she said, with that innocent smile that melted my heart. Where are Mommy and Daddy? I knelt to be at her height. I had practiced this moment in my mind, but it was still difficult. My love, Mommy and Daddy had to go away for a while. They're going to be working in a place where they can't have visitors. Like when Daddy goes on business trips? Sarah asked. Something like that, my love. But it's going to be a very long trip. In the meantime, you're going to stay with Grandma. Is that all right with you? Her eyes lit up. Forever? Forever, I confirmed. Sarah hugged me tightly. That's good. I always wanted to live with you, Grandma. I feel safe here. Her words confirmed that I had made the right decision. This child had been living in a toxic environment without even knowing it. That afternoon, while Sarah was playing in the backyard, I received an unexpected call. It was Agent Williams. Mrs. Collins, I have important news. The information your lawyer provided us has resulted in the arrest of 12 more people in 3 different states. 12 people? Michael was part of something much bigger than we thought. His money laundering operation was connected to drug trafficking, human trafficking, and international bank fraud. I sat down heavily. And all this was happening while they were coming to dinner at my house on Sundays? Apparently so. Michael had been using Brittany as a liaison with other criminals. She knew more people than she admitted. The agent paused. Mrs. Collins, you didn't just save yourself from being murdered. You helped take down a major criminal network. 3 weeks after the arrest, I was called to testify before a federal grand jury. It was the first time I had ever been in a courthouse, and I must admit I was nervous. But when I saw Michael and Brittany in their orange prison jumpsuits, all my anxiety transformed into a cold determination. Michael had lost a lot of weight. His hair was disheveled and he had deep circles under his eyes. The arrogance that had defined his personality had been replaced by the look of a cornered animal. Brittany looked even worse. She had been crying so much that her eyes were permanently swollen and red. The federal prosecutor, a man named Daniels, guided me through my testimony. Mrs. Collins, can you tell us what happened on the night of March 17th at the restaurant? I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. I described the humiliation of the limited guest card, the threats to have me committed to a nursing home, the documents they wanted me to sign. I talked about the recordings where they planned my murder, about the laundered money they had been spending, about how they had alienated Sarah from me. When I got to the part where Michael yelled, "That crazy old woman is setting us up," several members of the jury exchanged looks of disgust. Michael looked smaller and smaller in his chair. Mrs. Collins, the prosecutor continued, at any point during these threats, did you fear for your life? Absolutely, I replied. When I heard the recordings where they described exactly how they were going to make my death look like an accident, I realized I wasn't dealing with my family. I was dealing with potential murderers. Michael's defense attorney, a nervous man who clearly knew he had a lost cause, tried to discredit my testimony. "Mrs. Collins, isn't it true that you deliberately misled your family about your true financial situation?" "Yes," I answered honestly. "I kept my finances private. And isn't it true that this privacy led your family to mistakenly believe that you needed help?" "No," I answered firmly. "My privacy did not lead them to plan my murder. Their greed led them to plan my murder." The lawyer tried another tactic. "Isn't it possible that the conversations you recorded were taken out of context, that they were just fantasies with no real intention?" I leaned slightly forward in my seat. "Mr. Lawyer, do you consider planning how to make a person's death look like an accident a normal fantasy?" The jury chuckled discreetly. The defense attorney turned red and asked no more questions. When it was Brittany's turn, her lawyer tried to present her as a victim of Michael. "My client was manipulated by an older and more sophisticated man," she argued. "She never would have participated in these activities on her own accord." But the prosecutor had a devastating surprise prepared. "Your Honor, I would like to play recording number 7. It was a conversation between Brittany and Michael that I hadn't heard before. In it, Brittany not only participated in the planning of my death, but suggested specific methods. "We could just push her down the stairs," Brittany's voice said clearly. "Or maybe something with medication. At her age, no one would suspect a thing." Michael's voice replied, "I like the way you think, honey. That's why I love you." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Brittany started sobbing, but her tears no longer generated sympathy. The members of the jury looked at her with horror and disgust. After my testimony, Agent Williams took me aside. "Mrs. Collins, there's something else you need to know. We've found evidence that Michael and Brittany are not first-timers at this." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "We've been investigating the death of Brittany's first husband, Sarah's biological father." The world swayed around me. Sarah's father died 5 years ago in what was classified as a car accident, but now with everything we know about Michael and Brittany's methods. "You think they killed him?" I whispered. "We're reopening the case. Michael had significant debts at the time, and Brittany inherited a considerable life insurance policy." I sat down heavily in a chair in the hallway. "Does Sarah know anything about this?" "There's no evidence that the girl knows anything, but Mrs. Collins, this means Sarah isn't just better off with you because of the current circumstances. You may have saved her life." The implications hit me like a hammer. If Brittany had killed her first husband for money, what would have stopped her from harming Sarah if the girl had ever gotten in the way of her plans? That night, as Sarah did her homework at the kitchen table, I watched her with new eyes. This child had not only lost her criminal parents, she had escaped from murderers who lived in her own house. "Grandma," Sarah said, looking up from her math, "do you think Mommy and Daddy are coming back soon?" It was a question she asked me at least once a week. Each time it was harder to answer. "My love," I said, sitting down next to her, "are you happy here with me?" Sarah smiled, a huge, happy smile. "Yes, there's no yelling, no fighting, and there's always good food. Plus, you always have time for me." Her words broke my heart and filled me with fury at the same time. This child had been living in an environment of violence and neglect and considered it normal until she experienced something different. 2 days later, William called me with the final news. "Mrs. Collins, they both pleaded guilty." "Both?" "Michael accepted a deal. 30 years with no chance of parole for 20 years. Brittany received 25 years, also with no parole for 20 years. I did the math in my head. Michael would be almost 70 years old when he got out of prison. Brittany would be 55. Sarah would be a 28-year-old adult woman with her own life established. Essentially, my children had disappeared from our lives forever. "Did they ask to see you?" I asked. "Michael asked for a meeting. He wants to apologize and explain his actions. I laughed bitterly. And Brittany? Brittany blames everyone but herself. She says prison is very hard, that the food is terrible, that the other inmates bother her. I'm not interested in seeing them, I said firmly. They both had multiple opportunities to change course. They chose the path that led them here. And if Sarah wants to see them when she's older, that will be Sarah's decision, when she's old enough to fully understand who her parents are and what they did. The investigation also revealed that Michael had been stealing money from the bank where he worked. The total of his financial crimes exceeded $1 million. Brittany had been receiving dirty money for 3 years. Money she used to buy designer clothes, fake jewelry, and luxury vacations. All while they treated me like a burden, like a useless old woman who didn't understand the modern world. The most satisfying moment came when the bank foreclosed on all the assets Michael and Brittany had bought with stolen or laundered money. The house, the car, the jewelry, everything was confiscated. They were left with absolutely nothing, exactly as they had planned to do to me. The final irony was that the money they recovered from their bank accounts and seized assets wasn't even enough to pay their legal debts. Michael and Brittany would not only go to prison for decades, but would come out completely broke. 6 months after the trial, Sarah and I had established a beautiful routine. Every morning, we had breakfast together while she told me about her dreams from the night before. Every afternoon after school, we did homework together and then cooked dinner. On weekends, we explored the city, visited museums, and went to the park. For the first time in decades, I felt truly alive. Sarah's transformation had been extraordinary. The shy, nervous girl I had rescued from a toxic home had become a confident little person, full of curiosity and joy. Her grades had improved dramatically. She had made new friends, and at night she slept peacefully, without nightmares. "Grandma," she said one morning while eating her cereal, "do you think I'm a bad person because I don't miss Mommy and Daddy very much?" The question broke my heart. "My love, you're not bad. You're a smart child who knows how to recognize when you're in a safe and loving place." "It's just that I feel different here," Sarah continued, "like I can be myself without being afraid of doing something wrong." Her words confirmed what I had suspected. Sarah had been walking on eggshells in her own home, trying not to bother parents who were too busy with their crimes to love her properly. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was the director of a local charity foundation. "Mrs. Collins, we've heard about your story. We were wondering if you would be interested in collaborating with us on a special project." "What kind of project?" I asked, curious. "We want to create a program for older adults who have been victims of family or financial abuse, a place where they can receive legal advice, emotional support, and help rebuilding their lives." The idea excited me immediately. "What would you need from me?" "Your story, Mrs. Collins, your experience, and if you're willing, we would like you to be the director of the program. You demonstrated that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and rebuild your life." I accepted without hesitation. I had found my purpose, to help other older adults who were going through the same thing I had. People who had been underestimated, manipulated, or abused by their own families. The New Beginnings program opened its doors 3 months later. In the first month, we helped 15 people, older men and women who had been scammed by their children, threatened by their grandchildren, or tricked into signing documents that left them with nothing. Every story reminded me why I had made the decisions I had. Every person we helped regain their dignity and their rights validated the hardness I had shown toward Michael and Brittany. One of our first clients was a woman named Naomi, 72 years old, whose son had kicked her out of her own house after forcing her to transfer the property to him. "Mrs. Collins," she told me, crying, "my son said I had already served my purpose in life and that it was time for me to step aside." The exact same words Michael had said to me. "Naomi," I replied, taking her hands, "your purpose in life is not defined by some ungrateful child. Your purpose is defined by you." With William's help, we got Naomi's house back, and her son faced charges for elder fraud. Sarah became the unofficial mascot of the program. After school, she would come to the office and help by organizing papers, serving coffee to visitors, and simply being the light that many of our clients needed to see. A happy and confident child who reminded them that families could be sources of love, not pain. "My grandma says everyone deserves respect," Sarah would explain to visitors with that simple wisdom children have. "No matter how old we are." Her words often made our clients cry, but they were tears of hope. A year after the sentencing, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Brittany. William had warned me she would probably try to contact me, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. "Dear Mom," the letter began, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you at least read this. Prison has given me time to reflect on everything I did wrong. I realize now that I was a terrible daughter, a negligent mother, and a selfish person." I continued reading, curious to see if there was genuine remorse or if it was another manipulation. Michael convinced me to do things I knew were wrong, but that's no excuse. I made my own decisions. I chose greed over love. I chose easy money over honest work, and I almost chose murder over family. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing all her mistakes and asking for forgiveness. It ended with, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to allow me to be a part of Sarah's life. I just hope you know that I finally understand the harm I caused, and that every day I live with that guilt." I read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. Maybe it was genuine, maybe it was another manipulation. It didn't matter. The damage had been done, the decisions had been made, and the consequences were permanent. Michael also sent a letter, but I threw it away without reading it. I had no interest in hearing the excuses of a man who had recorded his voice planning my death and then yelled that I was a crazy old woman when he was arrested. 2 years after the trial, Sarah turned 10. We organized a party in the backyard. We invited her friends from school and celebrated the life we had built together. As I watched Sarah laugh and play with her friends, I thought about everything we had gained by losing Michael and Brittany: peace, security, genuine love, mutual respect, a relationship based on honesty instead of manipulation. "Grandma," Sarah said that night as I tucked her in, "do you think Mommy and Daddy are okay where they are?" It was a question I knew would eventually come. "I think they're learning, my love. Learning that decisions have consequences." "And do you think I'll ever want to see them?" "I don't know, Sarah. When you're older, you can decide if you want to know the whole story and if you want to try to have a relationship with them. But always remember that you deserve to be loved and respected no matter what." "I know," Sarah said, hugging me. "You taught me that." In my 5th year of directing New Beginnings, we had helped more than 200 older people regain their rights, their properties, and their dignity. The program had expanded to 3 cities and had inspired similar programs in other states. A journalist from the local newspaper wanted to write an article about my story. During the interview, he asked me, "Mrs. Collins, do you regret being so hard on your children?" "No," I answered without hesitation. "I regret not being harder sooner. If I had set clear boundaries from the beginning, maybe they never would have gone so far down their criminal path." What would you say to other older adults who are being mistreated by their families? That their age doesn't make them any less valuable. That their love for their family doesn't obligate them to tolerate abuse. And that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and demand respect. Sarah, now 13 years old, had decided she wanted to be a lawyer like William, to help vulnerable people. "I want to protect grandparents like you protected me," she would explain. The night before I turned 70, Sarah gave me a letter she had written for me. "Dear Grandma," it read, "thank you for saving me from a life I didn't know was bad until I experienced a good one. Thank you for teaching me that real love doesn't hurt, doesn't threaten, and doesn't manipulate. Thank you for showing me that being strong doesn't mean being cruel, and that being kind doesn't mean being weak." The letter ended with, "When I grow up, I want to be exactly like you, brave, smart, and willing to fight for what's right, no matter how hard it is." That night, As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that the most perfect revenge wasn't sending Michael and Brittany to prison. The most perfect revenge was building a life so full of love, purpose, and joy that their absence was a blessing instead of a loss. And you, who have listened to my story to the end, tell me, have you ever experienced an injustice like this? Have you had to make difficult decisions to protect those you love? Tell me in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to find the strength to stand up for themselves, because in the end, the most important lesson I learned is this: never allow anyone, not even your own family, to treat you as if you are less than you are. Your value does not diminish with age. Your wisdom does not become obsolete. And your right to respect and dignity is unbreakable. Sometimes the most loving act you can do is to say, "No more," and stand your ground no matter the consequences. 5 years after that terrible day at the restaurant, I find myself sitting in my office at New Beginnings, reviewing the month's cases. At 75 years old, my energy is still the same, but now I have a motivation I never had before. Every day I can help someone who is going through the same thing I did. Sarah, now 18 years old, is about to graduate from high school with honors. She was accepted into a state university with a full scholarship to study law. Her admission essay was titled, "The Woman Who Taught Me That True Love Protects," and when I read it, I cried with pride for an hour. This morning, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was the warden of the state prison, where Brittany is serving her sentence. "Mrs. Collins, your daughter has been requesting a visit for the last 6 months. She has completed multiple rehabilitation programs, and the prison psychologist says she has shown genuine remorse." After 5 years of complete silence, the idea of seeing Brittany filled me with conflicting emotions. "What programs did she complete?" I asked. "Therapy for manipulators, a class on family violence, personal responsibility programs, and she's working as a tutor for other illiterate inmates." Maybe it was real this time. Maybe 5 years in prison had really changed the woman who once planned my death. "Let me think about it," I told the warden. "I'll give you an answer next week." That afternoon, while Sarah and I were preparing dinner together, I told her about the call. Sarah, now a mature and thoughtful young woman, listened in silence. "What do you feel about it, Grandma?" she asked me. "Curiosity," I admitted. 5 years is a long time. People can change, but I also know that some people just learn to manipulate better. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "What if we went together? Not to reconcile, but to close that chapter for good." The idea surprised me. "You want to see your mother?" "I want to see what she's become. I want to ask her why she thought it was okay to plan to kill my grandma, and I want her to know who I am now, the person I became without her influence." A week later, Sarah and I drove to the state prison. It was a gray, depressing building surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. As we waited in the visitors' room, I watched the other families. Some seemed hopeful, others just resigned. When they brought Brittany in, I barely recognized her. She had lost a lot of weight. Her hair was completely gray, and she wore glasses. But what impacted me most was her expression. She no longer had the arrogance that had defined her personality. She looked humble. "Mom," she said with a broken voice when she sat across from us. "Sarah." Her eyes filled with tears when she saw her daughter. "Look how beautiful you've become." Sarah watched her with a kind of scientific curiosity, as if she were studying a rare specimen. "Hello, Brittany," I said, deliberately using her first name instead of calling her daughter. "The warden says you've been taking classes." Brittany nodded nervously. "Yes, classes on what I did to you, on why I was so blind for so long." "Tell us what you learned," Sarah said with a maturity that filled me with pride. Brittany took a deep breath. "I learned that the victims of my greed weren't just you. I was a victim of my own need to have more, to impress others, to live a life I couldn't honestly afford. And Michael, do you still blame him?" I asked. "Michael was my accomplice, not my leader," Brittany admitted. "I made my own decisions. I chose money over family. I participated in planning your Your murder." The word came out as a whisper. Sarah leaned forward. "What did you feel when you were planning to hurt my grandma?" It was a direct and brutal question. Brittany covered her face with her hands. "Nothing. I felt nothing. And that's what terrifies me the most now, that I could plan something so horrible without feeling any guilt." "And now?" Sarah insisted. "Now I feel everything," Brittany replied. "Guilt, shame, horror for what I almost did, but also gratitude that I didn't succeed, gratitude that you are alive and safe." I asked her about the other crimes, about the laundered money, about Brittany's first husband. She confessed everything. Her first marriage had been for money, and when her husband threatened to divorce her after discovering her excessive spending, she and Michael had sabotaged his car. "We were monsters," she said simply. "Murderers for greed." She then turned to her daughter. "And Sarah, you were next on the list if you ever got in the way of our plans." Sarah remained unfazed. "I know Grandma saved my life in many ways," she replied. "Not just physically, but emotionally. She taught me what real love is." After 2 hours, we prepared to leave. "Are you going to come back?" Brittany asked hopefully. Sarah and I exchanged glances. "No," I said firmly. This visit was to close this chapter, not to open a new one. "I understand," Brittany said, and for the first time in years, she seemed genuinely sincere. I just want you to know that every day I'm working to be a person who deserves your forgiveness, even if I never receive it." On the way back, Sarah was silent for an hour. Finally, she spoke. "I'm glad we saw her." "Why?" "Because it confirmed that you made the right decision. That woman we saw today isn't my mother. My mother is you, Grandma." That night, as I reflected on the visit, I realized that seeing Brittany had been liberating in an unexpected way. She was no longer the monster of my nightmares, but she wasn't my daughter either. She was simply a woman who had made terrible decisions and was now living with the consequences. The following week, New Beginnings received an anonymous donation of $100,000. The letter that came with the donation read, "To honor a brave woman who stood up for herself and saved her granddaughter." We never found out who sent it, but I suspect it was someone whose story was similar to mine. Today, as I write these final words, Sarah is packing to go to college. In a few weeks, for the first time in years, I'll be alone in my house, but I don't feel lonely. I feel complete. I have built a legacy of strength, justice, and unconditional love. I have shown that age doesn't mean weakness, that kindness doesn't mean being a victim, and that sometimes the most loving act is to say, "No more," and stand your ground. My story ended up being the exact opposite of what Michael and Brittany planned. Instead of dying forgotten and robbed, I lived to protect others and be remembered as a woman who refused to be a victim. And that, I believe, is the sweetest victory of all. Gefällt dir meine Geschichte und aus welcher Stadt hörst du sie? Lass uns in den Kommentaren treffen. Wenn dir die Geschichte gefallen hat, kannst du mich unterstützen, indem du mir ein Super Thanks schickst, damit ich mehr solche Geschichten machen kann. Vielen Dank für deine tolle Unterstützung. Ich freue mich auf deinen Kommentar zur Geschichte. Auf dem Bildschirm siehst du 2 neue Lebensgeschichten, die ich dir wirklich empfehlen kann. Es gibt noch viel mehr auf meinem Kanal. Vergiss nicht zu abonnieren. Bis zur nächsten Lebensgeschichte.